Sam walked down the street after school with her head lowered, her school bag dragging by her side. The laughter of her classmates still echoed in her ears. They had laughed when her books had fallen, they had laughed when she stumbled. And even though she tried to pretend it didn't hurt, inside she felt broken and humiliated. The world felt too loud, too cruel, and too quick to mock her mistakes. The world, she thought, was merciless to those who were quiet. And Sam was quiet. She was 11 years old, with soft brown hair tied into a messy ponytail, and eyes that carried more sadness than joy. That afternoon, the sting of being laughed at once again made her wish she could vanish. And as she dragged her feet through the park, the burden of loneliness pressed heavier on her small shoulders. Her steps grew heavier as she reached the park near her home. She often cut across the grass to shorten her walk. But she dragged her feet through the dirt path, she tripped. Her knees scraped the ground, her palms burned. And her books once again spilled everywhere. Hot tears blurred her vision as she struggled to pick them up. But before she could rise, the sound of cruel giggles returned. A group of children nearby saw her fall and immediately began to point and laugh, their voices sharp and merciless. "Look at her," one shouted. "She can't even walk straight." Their words pierced deeper than the scrape on her knee. Sam felt her face flush with shame as though the world itself was against her. She wanted to cry, but the sting of humiliation forced her to swallow the tears. Just then, she heard the soft sound of paws against the earth. Out from the line of trees came a dog. His fur was golden brown, rough from life on the streets. But his eyes shone with kindness. His ears perked forward as he looked at her. And his tail wagged slowly. He ignored the cruel laughter of the other kids and walked directly toward her. The dog approached without hesitation, ignoring the laughter of the children. His eyes locked onto Sam. And she felt something strange, an understanding, a quiet promise of protection. He stopped in front of her, placed his body firmly between her and the mocking kids, and barked loudly. The sound was so deep and fierce that the laughter died instantly in the children's throats. The bark echoed through the park like thunder. The children, startled, stopped laughing. Another bark followed, louder, deeper, stronger. Fear replaced their mockery. And one by one they scattered away, retreating into the distance until only Sam and the dog remained. For the first time that day, Sam felt a sense of safety, not because people had changed, but because someone had chosen to stand by her side. Sam stared at the dog in awe. No one had ever defended her like that. Not her classmates, not even strangers, yet this dog, who didn't even know her, had stood up for her without hesitation. Her tears spilled. But this time they were tears of relief. The dog turned his head and licked her scraped knee gently. Then nudged her hand with his nose as if saying, "You are safe now. Don't be afraid." Her trembling hand rose and touched his fur, warm and coarse beneath her fingers. In that simple moment, the humiliation melted. She no longer felt like the weak girl who everyone mocked, she felt like someone worthy of being protected, someone worth standing up for. The dog sat down beside her as she gathered her books. He didn't leave. His eyes followed her every movement, his tail sweeping against the ground. When she rose to her feet, he rose too, walking beside her as if it was his duty. Sam whispered, "Are you coming with me?" The dog wagged his tail. And in his silence, she found the answer was yes. She limped home with the dog at her side. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone. Every step felt lighter, not because the world had changed, but because she knew she wasn't walking it by herself anymore. Sam's mother frowned when she saw her daughter return home with a scraped knee and mud-stained clothes. But her eyes softened when she noticed the golden dog standing firmly beside her. Instead of shooing him away, she gave him a bowl of water. And Sam felt a strange glow in her chest as the dog lapped eagerly, his tail wagging like he had finally found a place where he belonged. That night, Sam could hardly sleep because the memory of the bark that silenced her bullies kept replaying in her mind. For the first time, she fell asleep smiling. In the quiet of the night, the dog lay outside her door as if he knew she needed him there. Every sound in the darkness made his ears twitch, every faint creak in the house made him lift his head. And every time Sam shifted in bed, he adjusted his body, keeping watch like a faithful guardian. When morning arrived, the first thing Sam saw when she opened her door was his loyal eyes staring back at her. And she whispered softly, "Good morning, Brave," for that was the name she decided to give him. Brave followed her to school the next day, waiting at a distance as she entered. Then patiently lying under a tree until she came out again. The children noticed and whispered about the stray dog who seemed so protective of Sam. They didn't dare laugh at her that day, not with Brave's eyes watching from the fence. Sam felt stronger than ever before. Because loyalty was walking just behind her. Days turned into weeks. And the bond between Sam and Brave grew deeper. He followed her to the park, he curled up near her feet when she read books in her room. And he barked at strangers who came too close with unfriendly eyes. He never asked for anything except her company. But in return, he gave her protection, warmth. But a loyalty that felt more human than anything she had ever received from the people around her. One afternoon, when the same children tried to mock her again, Brave stood tall and let out a low, rumbling growl. The laughter stopped instantly, replaced by silence and nervous shuffling. Sam, emboldened by his presence, looked up and for the first time did not lower her eyes. She met their stares directly, her chin raised. And the children turned away. It was Brave's bark that had silenced them before. But it was his loyalty that had taught Sam how to find her own voice. Sam began to notice the changes inside herself. She was no longer the girl who trembled under the weight of humiliation. She walked taller, spoke a little louder, and smiled more often. It wasn't that the world had suddenly grown kind, it was that Brave had taught her she didn't have to carry the cruelty of others inside her heart. His very presence was a reminder that she was worth defending, worth loving, worth standing beside. At night, she would often whisper to him about her day, telling him her fears, her little victories, and her dreams. Brave would tilt his head, listening intently, and wag his tail as if he understood every word. Sam felt heard in a way she had never felt before. She often thought, maybe people don't understand me. But he does. Rainy days came. And even then Brave never left her side. Once, when she slipped in the mud and dropped her bag again, she braced herself for the sting of laughter from others, but this time, Brave leapt forward, pressing his body against hers, licking her cheek until she laughed instead of crying. Humiliation had turned into laughter, not because the world had changed, but because Brave had rewritten the meaning of falling. Her neighborhood soon came to know of the dog who never left Sam's side. They whispered about his courage, about the way he chased off bullies, and how he stood at her door every night like a soldier on duty. For Sam, Brave was not a stray, he was family, protector, and teacher. She had once thought of herself as invisible. But with him, she felt seen every single day. Her classmates noticed too. The same children who used to mock her now kept their distance, wary of Brave's piercing bark. But Sam no longer lived only in his shadow of protection, she had begun to grow into her own courage. The dog had defended her dignity until she learned how to defend it herself. Sam's world, once so full of loneliness, began to bloom with color. She felt joy in small things, reading under a tree while Brave dozed beside her, walking home with his steady footsteps in rhythm with her own, or whispering secrets into his ear as though he could answer back. And though he couldn't speak, his eyes spoke volumes. They told her she was not alone, she was not weak. And she was not the girl defined by laughter. The day came when another younger child in her school tripped and fell. And laughter filled the air just as it had for Sam months earlier. But this time, Sam stepped forward. She bent down, helped the child up. And said, "Don't worry. You're not alone." Brave stood beside her, barking softly as though approving her action. It was then Sam realized she had not only found strength in her dog, she had also learned how to pass it on. Brave grew older as the seasons changed. But his loyalty never faded. Even when his steps slowed and his fur grayed, he rose every time Sam needed him. She would stroke his back and whisper, "You saved me," and his calm, steady gaze seemed to reply, "And you saved me too." In giving him a home, she had given him purpose. In giving her loyalty, he had given her courage. The scars on her knees healed. But the scars in her heart had turned into strength. She no longer remembered her past as humiliation, but as the beginning of a journey. A journey where a stray dog had taught her the meaning of loyalty, courage, and humanity. Sam knew that people often spoke of dogs as loyal. But she believed Brave was more than that. He was loyal, yes. But he was also kind, protective. But wise in a way that showed her what humanity should truly look like. When others had laughed, he had defended. When others had turned away, he had stood by. In his loyalty, she had found the truest form of love. Sam often sat by the river with Brave at her side, watching the water flow and feeling a peace she had never known before. She spoke her dreams into the air, dreams of being stronger, of proving herself, of showing kindness where the world had shown her cruelty. Brave's eyes followed her face. And though he could not speak, it felt as though he understood everything she said. As months passed, Sam realized that the heaviness in her chest, the constant shame and humiliation she once carried, had begun to fade. It wasn't that the world had grown gentler, it was that Brave had taught her to see herself differently. His loyalty had built a shield around her heart. She no longer believed the voices of those who laughed. Because his loyalty whispered louder, "You matter." Brave's presence gave her courage to join games in the park, to smile at people she once avoided, and to raise her hand in class without fear of laughter. Slowly, the girl who had once been a shadow became someone brighter, someone who stood taller, someone who believed in her own worth. Every step of that transformation was marked by the steady sound of Brave's paws beside her. The children who once mocked her now spoke of her with curiosity. They wondered why she no longer bowed under their laughter. Some whispered that it was the dog who gave her courage. Others believed Sam had simply changed. The truth, of course, was both. Brave had defended her until she learned to defend herself. One evening, a storm swept across the town. Rain pounded the rooftops, lightning split the sky, and thunder boomed like the anger of giants. Sam sat by the window, her knees hugged to her chest. But Brave lay at her feet, calm, steady, unafraid. His calmness spread into her, teaching her again that fear could be conquered not with strength, but with loyalty by your side. The next day, she walked through the park and saw the very spot where she had first met Brave. She remembered the laughter, the sting of shame, the tears, but stronger than all of it, she remembered the dog who had stepped out of the trees and stood for her when no one else did. That memory had rewritten her entire life. Brave became a legend in her neighborhood. People admired the stray who had chosen a lonely girl and turned her into someone strong. They marveled at his devotion, at the way he stood guard every night, at the way his bark alone silenced cruelty. To Sam, though, he was not just a legend. He was family. As years passed, Brave grew older. His once golden fur turned gray around the muzzle, his movements slowed. But his eyes never lost the fire that had first met hers in the park. Sam cared for him tenderly, remembering every moment he had cared for her when she was small and afraid. Their bond was no longer just girl and dog, it was soul and soul. Sam sometimes thought about the word humanity. People often said it was about kindness, compassion, and understanding. Yet she had first seen it not in people, but in a dog. When the world had laughed, Brave had shown humanity in the purest form. His loyalty, his courage, his love, that was humanity. One autumn day, she sat with Brave under the fading sunlight. The trees shed their leaves, and the wind carried whispers of change. She stroked his fur gently and whispered, "You saved me. You taught me what it means to be brave. You showed me what love is." Brave laid his head in her lap, closing his eyes with trust as deep as eternity. Sam often wondered if fate had chosen that moment, that place, to bring them together. She wondered if Brave had been sent to her, not just as a companion, but as a lesson. A lesson that humiliation does not define you. A lesson that strength can be found in loyalty. A lesson that sometimes, love arrives in the form of 4 paws and a beating heart. When she returned to the park one evening, she saw another child fall and be laughed at. Her chest tightened with old memories. But she no longer hesitated. She walked forward, helped the child up, and said, "You're not alone." Brave, older now, gave a gentle bark as if to approve. And if to say, "This is the legacy I gave you." Sam's life became brighter, not because the world had changed, but because she had. Brave had turned her pain into power, her humiliation into strength, her loneliness into compassion. She was no longer just the quiet girl who stumbled. She was Sam, the girl who had learned courage from a dog. Even in his later years, Brave never left her side. He followed her slowly but steadily, his tail still wagging, his eyes still warm. And when people asked Sam what had changed her life, she always said, "A dog. A loyal dog who taught me more than any person ever did." Brave's loyalty was unshakable until the very end. On his final day, he lay with his head in Sam's lap, her hands stroking his fur, tears falling as she whispered gratitude for every moment, every bark, every step. She told him he had given her everything. He had taken away her shame, given her courage, and shown her love. When he closed his eyes for the last time, Sam felt as though part of her heart had been carved away. But she also felt a deeper truth, that Brave's loyalty lived on in her strength, in the compassion she showed others, in the courage she carried every single day. Years passed, but Sam never forgot him. Whenever she saw a stray dog in the streets, she knelt down, offered food, and whispered, "Thank you," as if every dog carried a piece of Brave's spirit. She carried his lesson into her life, into her friendships, into her kindness toward others. Sam grew into a woman known for her courage and compassion. People admired her strength, but few knew that it had been born from humiliation, transformed by the loyalty of a dog. Brave's legacy was alive in her, and she lived each day as a tribute to the love he had given. And whenever she told her story, she never left out the most important part, that it wasn't a person who had saved her, but a dog. A dog who had stood between her and cruelty. A dog who had barked so loudly the world went silent. A dog who had taught her that loyalty and humanity are sometimes found in the simplest, purest hearts. In the quiet moments of her life, Sam would sit by the river where she once sat with Brave. She would close her eyes and hear the echo of his bark, feel the warmth of his fur beneath her hand. And she would whisper into the wind, "You're still with me." Because Brave was more than just a dog. He was the proof that love can heal humiliation, loyalty can rebuild broken hearts, and humanity is not always defined by humans. Brave was the reminder that even in the cruelest world, kindness still exists. And it can change a life forever. Sam never forgot that her story began on the worst day of her childhood, when she had fallen in the dirt and been mocked. But she also remembered that it was on that same day that her story truly began. Because a dog had stepped forward and shown her what it meant to be loved without condition. And so the story of Sam and her loyal dog lived on, not just in her heart but in every act of kindness she shared, in every moment of courage she displayed, and in every whisper of loyalty that passed from one soul to another. It was not the story of a girl and her pet, it was the story of two beings who saved each other. Brave had given her everything, and she had given him a home. Together they had proven that loyalty is the purest form of love, that humiliation can be transformed into dignity, and that sometimes the truest humanity shines not from people, and from the heart of a faithful dog.